I have a story. It starts with a metaphor one can only come up with after a day of LSD and self-reflection. There's this puzzle that's been following my whole life. It hides behind corners, under beds, and in closets, but its presence is known without sight. I've never confronted it. It was more ominous than it was intimidating. I opened it only after the death of a friend left me at my most vulnerable. I didn't know how to heal, where to start, so I opened the box that's been with me my whole life. The corners are where everything starts. In this case, the corners are me, my parents, my house, and the year. Sorry about that, guys. From there you do the border. You fill it in with first this and first that, and stuff like this, which is still how I look on the toilet today, by the way. Piece by piece you go, from kindergarten to senior year. I know you're wondering who's next to me here. I'm not allowed to show you because of paperwork and stuff. But her name is Linda, and last I saw of her, she was training to be manager at the new McDonald's. I'm afraid that's where most class clowns end up. My mom and sister moved away the day I went to college. I stayed for 3 months before I dropped out to do this, I guess. I also figured out that I like being a girl just as much as I like being a boy. It's the first time I've said that out loud. Surprise. I started smoking weed. I went cliff jumping with my friends, and well, you saw how that turned out. I wish that's where this ended, but it's not. I got a new job after Jake died. I liked it. I got to work with kids again. Months went by, and slowly things started to feel normal. But one day at work, I got a phone call. My dad tried to kill himself. He was tired of his disease and took a handful of pain pills, the same kind he'd been addicted to, since the rarity of his disease led to a series of misdiagnoses and unneeded surgeries. Thankfully, the neighbor found him. He was checked into a facility. Knowing him, I couldn't help but picture Jack Nicholson in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, which is actually one of his favorite movies. He'd call me from the payphone at least a few times a day. I usually couldn't answer because he always called when I was at work. At the time, missing the calls didn't bother me. I had no doubt he'd live. I'd do anything for one now. When I did catch his calls, I was surprised how open he was, honest, about everything. My dad was the most honest an addict could be. I don't think he ever really lied about anything that wasn't related to money. What wasn't surprising was how stubborn he was, even in this situation. He was tired. He was drained. He was stuck in a chair with no more hopes and no more dreams. All he wanted was a goodbye ceremony with his family. And then, for the first time in my life, I yelled at him. I yelled at him with every breath in my body, because if he wasn't going to fight for his life, I sure as hell was. And the crazy thing is, it worked. He came home the next week. He was different, truly different. He was excited, even for rehab, which he'd swore he'd never go to. Too churchy, he said. He called his friends, even the ones he hadn't spoke to in years. He told them he loved them. He wanted to reconnect with them. He bought concert tickets for us to see his favorite bands. He ordered pizza, and we watched the Sabres game for old time's sake. And when they were losing 5-1, he turned it off for old time's sake. He went to the bathroom quick before we picked out a movie to watch instead. And after he pissed, he went into his room to the stash I looked for but never found. He relapsed, and his tolerance was so low his heart stopped immediately. He died 10 hours after coming home. The same cop I spoke to 2 weeks earlier asked me if it was suicide. The ironic thing is, it wasn't. It absolutely wasn't. My dad had a tattoo on his arm. It said, "Die trying." something he told the doctors he'd do when they said he'd never walk again. And he did. He relapsed. He overdosed. But he did not give up. He died trying.
Well, that's my story. It's unfinished, but it's mine. I think I'm proud of it so far. I usually am at this stage of things. I have this joke. It goes, I have ADHD, which means I like to start things, but I have a hard time. And it's true. I have a mountain of wasted potential and half-finished genius. I don't know if this story is like that yet. Hopefully not. There are great things that are supposed to happen to me, just like all the worst things did. At this point, I won't stop until I've got good news. I want to be a comedian. One that makes money. A lot of it. Enough to buy a nice house at least. Of course, I'll need someone to share it with. Maybe even a little someone. Hopefully by then my mom and sister will be back to play aunt and grandma. Who knows what else will happen. I don't know if this is inspirational. It's definitely not a period piece. Maybe one day it could be both. But this isn't to inspire you. It's to inspire me. Because if my story doesn't look something like this, I'll die trying.